Good afternoon, Saints. It's good to be here again this afternoon, and I pray that as we share a few thoughts with each other, that things will become clear that you have already known. As the wise man Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun. But sometimes when you hear old things spoken in a different way, the penny drops and it starts to make sense. So I hope that this afternoon a few things will make sense that some of you may not have noticed before. Many books have been written about love, of which I have read a few of them. What I'm going to talk about this afternoon are the three basic components of a marriage relationship. And during the presentations, I'll also talk about different types of friendships. So let us bow our heads and ask God for wisdom before we begin. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for allowing us to be here. And we pray that you will grant us wisdom and understanding. This we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. So we're going to put one slide up on the screen now. Now here I've divided this love relationship into three segments: intimacy, companion, commitment, and passion. Now this is what is required to make a complete marital relationship. I will describe each section in turn. Intimacy is the ability to share your innermost thoughts and feelings with someone without fear of judgment, without inhibition, without hesitation. Commitment is the decision to stay together for a long time, even if things are not as exciting as they are at the beginning. And then passion is the physical, sexual part of a relationship. Now, don't raise your hands when I ask the question, because some of you may not get anything to eat when you go home tonight. But think about these questions to begin with. I'm going to talk first about intimacy. Intimacy is the ability to feel comfortable to share your innermost thoughts with somebody that you trust. How many of you can raise your hands to this one if you wish. How many of you have experienced a relationship or a friendship where you so completely trust that person and you feel so comfortable with the person that you can tell them anything that is on your mind without fear? How many of you have experienced that? Now that is a wonderful experience to experience, a wonderful feeling. Unfortunately, in many marriages, even long-term marriages, this intimacy is missing. There are married couples that don't really know what each other is thinking because they don't open up their thoughts. Married couples where there are secrets, where there is fear to share because you're not sure how it will be received. There are married situations where there are things from your past that you really want to offload and get off your chest, but you don't know how it will go down or what will be the end result of such sharing, so you keep quiet about such things. And the more of those things you build up in your marriage that you don't feel free to talk about, the weaker your sense of intimacy is. The danger with having a weak sense of intimacy in your marriage is that the temptation to share your innermost thoughts with other friends increases. This may be your mates of the same sex, or it may be friends of the opposite gender. You know, there are some people who specialize in saying, "How are you?" And you say, "Fine." And say, "No, how are you really?" And they're really concerned, or they appear to be, and they encourage you to open up. And if you feel that you can tell them something that's on your mind without them judging you, then you might do so. And the more you do that, the less you will feel the need to share that same thing with the person you are with. And then the intimacy starts shifting away. We'll talk a bit more about intimacy in a moment. Then there is commitment. There are so many relationships that use commitment words when they're going through their vows. They say, till death do us part. But what they really mean is as long as the good times last. They say the words, but the words have a different meaning. And so when the good times come to an end and hardship sets in, or deep-seated misunderstandings occur, they say things like, this is not what I went in for, or this is not what I was expecting, or I didn't bargain for this, or I don't want to live the rest of my life like this, or other similar statements. And so the commitment which was spoken in words, better or worse, richer or poorer, till death do us part, in sickness and in health, in actual fact means as long as the good times last. And there are things that can spoil commitment. One of them is when you find out things later that you should have found out before. When you start finding out things about your spouse later that you should have found out before, the automatic question that you begin to ask is, what else do I not know about this person? And as soon as that question begins to arise, then the exit strategy starts to form in your mind. Because in your mind, you're not leaving the person you made a commitment to, but you're leaving a different person who you really don't know. Then there is passion. Physical passion. Without this, you have at best a good friendship. But to be married, you have to join yourselves one to another physically, in order to experience the oneness that separates marriage from friendship. So we'll look at the next slide, and we'll go through this in turn and see how friendships grow. Imagine a friendship with none of these, so there's no intimacy, no commitment, and no passion. But what kind of friendship would that be? Imagine a relationship with no intimacy, no commitment, no passion. What you have there is somebody with whom you have a general casual interaction. You meet somebody at the bus stop and you say hi to them, and every day you see them you say hi. But you wouldn't tell them your inner thoughts. There's no commitment there to keep meeting them. It's just a coincidence, and there's no physical contact between you. So that's the everyday casual acquaintance, just your neighbor who you say hi to. And this is how most friendships start, as a casual acquaintance. You see somebody, you get to know their name maybe, you say hello, you talk about the weather, you talk about all the external things, but you don't talk about yourself. When you find that in these casual friendships, when you start feeling the need to tell that person something about yourself, it is an indication that you're ready to move from the casual acquaintance to a different kind of friendship. Next slide, please. So imagine now you've moved from one stage, from the casual acquaintance to the liking of somebody. This is where you've added just intimacy. There's no commitment to stay together, and there's no physical contact between you, just intimacy. Now you've met the person a number of times, you've talked about the weather and football and politics and all the other external things, but now you begin to feel the need to tell them something about yourself. And you're beginning to want to know what they are actually thinking. And there are so many marriages that don't have this. I was counseling somebody, and the lady said to me, I don't know what he is thinking, because he just doesn't talk. I said, doesn't he say anything? Oh yes, he talks about everything else except what he is thinking. When you add intimacy to a casual acquaintance, you're moving into the emotive part of a friendship where you can begin to like somebody. Because you can't like someone because of their opinion of the weather. You begin to like them when they tell you something about themselves. And you feel safe to tell them about yourself. And now you're moving into a kind of acquaintance where you can say, I like that person. I feel comfortable with that person to share my thoughts and feelings. But when you begin to feel comfortable with someone, this is where you feel like moving to the other stage. Next slide, please. Now, some people make the big mistake of jumping to this stage next. Before they have added commitment, they get carried away with physical attraction. So they move from intimacy, they talk and talk. Now, have you ever heard someone say, after a couple of hours of speaking, I feel that I have known this person all my life? It's not true, but it's a good feeling, isn't it? What they really mean is, I feel so comfortable with you that I can tell you everything in my mind, and eventually you will know everything about me. And some people feel so secure in intimacy that they think, right, we can go straight to passion. But when you do that, you bypass the commitment part. And then your relationship is built on the excitement of passion. And when that passion comes in, the intimacy takes second place. And then you end up in a trap. Because why would you buy something if you could try it indefinitely? There are some people that love to shop at Argos because you can take things back. Don't mention any names. But they just go there because they can try it and they can enjoy, and then they can wrap it carefully and take it back and get a refund. And then they try something else and enjoy it, wrap it carefully. But when you add passion instead of commitment, you end up in this situation where you can try things now without actually buying them. When you do that, the incentive to buy reduces. Because why would you pay for what you already have? Why would you add a commitment to something that is already in your lap? So the high physical desire, but there's no intimacy. Now you're not talking anymore because you're caught up with the endorphins. Plenty of loving touch, but this is like the one-night stand, where when it dies down, it will be dead. And then we move on to the next slide, which is just commitment. So imagine a relationship where there is no intimacy, so you're not talking deeply. There's no passion, there's no physical contact, but there is commitment. Some marriages end up like that. They started off with all three, but one by one, different arguments occurred and the talking stopped, and the intimacy died. When the intimacy died, the physical touch dies. But there was determination to stick it out to the bitter end. So they just hang in there till the grave or the second coming. And under those conditions, they can become very zealous for the second coming. Because they really want the second coming to hurry up and come. But God doesn't want us to desire His second coming because our life is so unhappy. He wants us to be happy and still desire His second coming. So what I've described here is relationships where only one of the three are present and they're incomplete. With intimacy alone, you just have somebody you like. With passion alone, you just have somebody you fancy or you have a one-night stand with. With commitment alone, you just have a long-term friendship. But it doesn't go anywhere beyond that. What we're going to talk about next is what often happens, is where you have two out of the three. And there are three combinations of those two that we're going to talk about. And then what I'm going to talk about is when you have all three, what happens when one starts to die, and how to recognize which one is dying when your relationship begins to crumble. Because many people who started off with all three run into problems, but they don't realize what the problem is. They don't realize which of these three is being deteriorated. So they just say, my marriage is in trouble. So what we're going to look at shortly is when your marriage begins to deteriorate, or should I say, if it begins to deteriorate, you can quickly pinpoint which of the three areas is becoming weak and work on the right area. Because if you don't know which area is weak, you'll put all the effort into the wrong area and it will still fall down. So we'll look at that shortly after a short break, a few items. Okay, so now we can move to the next slide. This is what many people call romance. You meet somebody, after a couple of hours you say to yourself, I have known this person all of my life. I can tell them anything about myself, and they have told me everything about themselves. Here is one fallacy. It is impossible for someone to tell you everything about themselves in 1 hour. But sometimes the nature of the things they say give us that impression. And so many people, armed with these two things, a premature dive into the passionate side of life, plus the intimacy, they say, I am in love. And what they are actually experiencing is infatuation. It's not actually a love. It is just a romantic infatuation, which will not last long unless they make a decision for it to last long. The question is, why would you make a decision if it's going well? If something is going really well, the tendency is to just say, okay then, let's just keep going and see how long it will last. So when one or the other says, well, let's make a commitment about this, let's make some plans, let's get married, suddenly there is a sense of panic in the person who is enjoying the passion. Because then they'll begin to think, if I have the intimacy and I have the passion, what do I have to gain by adding commitments to it? This is where they will look at all the other married couples who have been committed for years and they appear to be very unhappy. And they'll think, I am already happy. Why do I want to add that ingredient that makes the other people unhappy? Let's just carry on and see how long it lasts. And there is a particular weakness in this type of relationship, which we will go on to shortly. Next slide. This is where you have passion and commitment, but no intimacy. So you've got plenty of physical contact, and you fall head over heels in love with the person, or so you feel, and so you say, let's get married and stay together. But you haven't really talked deeply to each other about what you think and who you really are, and your background and your nature and your likes and your dislikes. So as a result, you think you know the person, but you don't. And those who get married on the strength of just a passionate feeling will be full of surprises when the truth begins to emerge about who that person really is. Next slide, please. Intimacy and commitment. This is where you can talk to someone about anything and you make a commitment to stay together. This is the ingredients of a solid, long-term friendship, like the engaged couple or the long-term friendship. Or sometimes it's the result of a marriage where there was once all three and then the passion died down, but they're still talking and they're still committed to being with each other. I realize that as I explain these different sections of the triangle, I'm explaining different relationships that are in the room. But as we go on, we will start to look at how they became that way and what we can do about them, or how we can diagnose the problem. Next slide, please. So if you then add commitment, then you will have a complete relationship. But you must add them in the right order. You know, when you're making a cake, there are, you can get the butter and the flour and the sugar and the raisins or the chocolate, whatever the cake you're making. But it depends on which order you mix the things in as to how the cake will come out. You can't just throw them in, well you can. I have done it. You can throw them in any or how, and something will rise up and you can eat it. But if you put them in a certain way, like if you blend the sugar with the fat until you get a smooth, creamy paste, and then you add the flour after, you get a lighter sponge than if you actually put the flour and If you put the flour and the fat and then add the sugar later, you get like a scone mixture. So the way in which you add them makes a difference to the end result. With relationships, the way in which you add the ingredients makes a difference to the outcome. So I'm going to give you a task to discuss now. This is just discuss with the person nearby you for a minute or two, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me what your conclusions are. What do you think you will build? What kind of relationship will you build if you started with passion, then added the intimacy, then added the commitment last? What would be the strengths and the weaknesses of that relationship? So you start with the physical, then you add the intimacy, which is the talking, and then you add the commitment last. What do you think would be the strengths and weaknesses of that type of relationship? Discuss for 2 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So what you've just been discussing is a relationship that starts off with the physical passion, and then you add the talking, which is the intimacy to it, and then you add the commitment on at the end. So what do you think would be the strengths and weaknesses of such a relationship? Anyone give me, just raise your hand and give me your feedback. So let's therefore, what do you think would be the weaknesses of such a relationship, the possible weaknesses? Yes. Okay, so you say there's 99% weakness, because if you start with passion, it's like a one-night stand. Okay, anyone else? Yes. Okay, and someone else says it's like a cake. If you start with the cake and you eat icing first, you might not want to eat the rest of the cake. Interesting, very good. Anyone else? What would be the disadvantages of such an arrangement, yeah?
I'm not sure.
Okay, just your ideas.
Because what we were saying...
Okay, the microphone is coming now. Excellent. So, speak to the microphone. Thank you.
I'm not sure, because what you said was that, you know, if you have a relationship that starts with the passion,
yes,
then develops the intimacy and develops the commitment, and it's therefore a consummate relationship.
Yes.
What's the
possible weakness of having started in that order?
I think that the trick is in the maintenance of the three.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the important thing is the maintenance of the three. I think it's risky to start with the passion first, because you're vulnerable, you don't know who this person is, there's no commitment, it's vulnerable. But once you have all three aspects of that relationship there, whether the butter went in with the sugar and then whatever order it came in, once you have those three aspects, the trick is to maintain them. I don't really believe that relationship, once it is formed and has all three aspects, I don't understand why that should be any more vulnerable than something that started with, like, you know, friendly chats, commitment to be with each other, sexual relationship.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? There's a hand over here. We'll take two more, and then we'll have some more items, and we'll continue. Yeah?
Me and Michael. We were talking about, it depends, if someone is passionately involved with someone first,
yes,
then just because of that you might become intimately involved with them, and then just because of that you might decide to commit.
yes.
But then if the passion goes,
Yeah.
well, the other bits were just added bonuses, and if the main thing that you were into has gone, then it's likely that the relationship will be weaker, because that's the most likely first thing to fade over a long period of time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we're talking about relationships that start off with passion, you add the intimacy, and then you add the commitment in at the end. Some relationships, when you've got all three, can survive. But there are some inherent weaknesses which are built into the order of things. Some questions may come into your mind later on which you may not be able to answer. For example, if the relationship with you started with passion, how did all the other relationships before you start? Did they all start in the same way? And if that is that person's starting point, then there may be many things that you have to learn about them later on that you don't know at the beginning. You see, if somebody starts off their friendships with talking, and then it doesn't work out and they move on to another friendship, then all you have left in your history is lots of friendships. But if somebody begins their relationship with physical intimacy, and it doesn't work, they'll move on to another relationship and begin that with physical intimacy, and the next one with physical intimacy. So by the time they come to you, if that's their starting point, then every relationship before you came along also had the same starting point. And there would be then an inherent weakness in that, because then the past friendships would have a different kind of implication on your relationship than if they were past platonic friendships. Some relationships can still survive that because they may have done the both things on this, both of them may have done the same thing. The second thing about starting with passion is that if you start with passion, if that's the most important thing about the relationship that got it going, then the relationship will be at its weakest when the passion is not available. And unfortunately, many relationships go through their most difficult time during normal periods when abstinence is required, like sickness or certain stages of pregnancy, or when people are working away for a long period of time. If that discipline of not being able to withhold yourself is not there at the beginning, many people think that when I get married, I won't need that kind of discipline because the physical passion will be available on top, but it isn't. There are many reasons why it's not available. If you don't go in with that discipline, when the discipline is required, that will give the relationship a higher level of stress than one that started off as a long-term friendship first. Because if you had a long-term friendship and you add the intimacy to it, you got the friendship to go back to. But if you start on the intimacy and then that goes for some reason, the friendship you have to fall back on is weaker. It can survive, but the survival rate is different from those that have grown up in a different order. We'll talk a bit more about different combinations shortly. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a different question now about these three things. Now, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to discuss this question also. So, here we have a complete marriage relationship. We have intimacy, we have passion, and we have commitment. The question is, if you are advising maybe your children or young people about how to proceed with relationships, in what order would you tell them to build their relationships and why? Okay, so look at these three things. In what order would you recommend that a relationship that should last a long time be built? Which should go first? Which would you say should go second? And which should go third? And why? So I'll give you 2 minutes to look at that and discuss that among yourselves. And then we'll do feedback and then we'll do some diagnostics afterwards. So who would like to raise your hand and just give us your recommended order of the three events and why you choose that particular order? Just raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. Anyone? Yes, there's a hand over here. Okay, so give us your recommended order and why.
The order would be intimacy. You get to know the person quite well, as much as possible, because you never ever know somebody quite complete. You'll always find out new things about someone, even after you get married. Then you make a commitment, and you tell yourself if that's the person you really want to spend the rest of your life with. Because when you're thinking about, because as Christians, when relationship progress, we should think about marriage. So you have to tell yourself, that's the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And you think about that commitment. And passion is a long way off, to be honest. So that's very last on my list, especially with my sons. It's very last. So it's really the intimacy and the commitment, and that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's another hand behind you. Order. Can I silence please so you can hear these comments?
Okay,
Yes.
I'm afraid we saw it a bit differently, and I didn't see it initially like this, but we speak of passion first in the sense of being passionate about the person and the things to do with the person in that relationship. So we say passion comes first.
So you're changing the meaning of the words now, is it?
No, I'm not. And then, well, we also mentioned that the wording, all those words would perhaps produce different words, but never mind. And after passion, commitment. So we're going to commit with what we've seen and the experiences we might have. And then from the commitment, we perhaps think about engagement and marriage. And after that, intimacy comes.
Okay, so you almost said the same thing, you just changed the meaning of the two words. You use intimacy to mean physical and passion to mean commitment. Okay. Okay, who else would like to share your order and why? Okay, one down here. Okay, one lady in the blue. Thank you.
I was just thinking about passion. Passion is also, you like the kind of person, like if you are a girl, you may want to be out with a taller guy, you know, just out of your preference, so you don't want a shorter guy, and you know, you just want a taller guy, and that is passion, you know, and you're going to, you know, you're going to associate with taller guys, you want, you know, and that passion will come first. If passion means, I like the look of this person, and it happens everywhere, even in church. Like, people see people who they like it's natural, it's, you know, your hormones, you're going to be attracted to people, you know, and that does come first, and then I thought next comes intimacy, because you get to associate and talk with those people, and then comes commitment. I think if commitment came in any other way, then it'd be like, she belongs to me, those kind of, I think that commitment comes last all the time.
Okay,
yes, that's
thank you. So, it's like redefining of the terms, but I understand what you're saying. The last comment, and then we'll move on to the next.
Sorry, that's my daughter speaking, so I have to make sure that we're clear here, right? I do believe that passion comes first, I do, but I don't believe in sex first, right? I can become intimately, I can develop intimacy with anyone. I can develop intimacy. I can be committed to anyone. I can decide to be committed to anyone. But if I don't fancy you, I can't make myself fancy you. So to a certain extent, that sexual attraction does need to be there, because I'm not sure that you can develop that if you didn't have it in the first place. We are advised against sexual relationships first. Obviously, I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying that there must be, because I can develop intimacy and I can develop commitment, but I don't know that I can make myself fancy you if I never did in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Now, what I want you to do is this. I want you to imagine that by whatever means you ended up with a complete relationship. Okay? Because in the Bible, sometimes things happen a different way. In the Bible, many of the marriages were very much like arranged marriages. In which case, the commitment would have come first, because the servant went out to find a wife for Isaac. She brought the wife back to Isaac. He was committed to her because his father had chosen, and he had agreed to marry her. He married her, then he got to know her, but they consummated the marriage next, and then he got to know her afterwards. So in the arranged marriage, commitment comes first, then you consummate it with passion, then you get to know them afterwards. In the marriages where you make a choice, then you see the person, Yes, there is that spark of attraction, so you want to get to know them, so you start to talk. When you get to know them and you begin to talk, you begin to consider, I can actually build a life with this person. They've got the right ingredients. And then you proceed to marry, and then the physical passion, which you were attracted to at the beginning, you can now play it out. Now let me ask you another question. I want those on the PA system, the slides, go back to the previous slide, please. Go back one. To slide number 8. That's right. Now, I want to talk about things in marriage that destroy your passion. In other words, things in marriage that destroy your physical relationship, the sexual, physical part of the relationship. Okay? Here are 3 things that destroy sexual relations within marriage. Things to avoid. You can recover from them, but you must try and avoid them. Number 1, never use your physical attractive. I'm trying to say this in a way that won't be too explicit. So, never use passion in the physical sense as a power tool to win an argument. Okay? There is a temptation in marriage for the one who has the most self-control to use their power of withdrawal from sexual activity to force the other one to submit. And eventually the one who is desperate for a coming together of the flesh will agree to whatever it is they disagreed with before because they are starving. If you do that, you will feel like you have won, but in fact you have lost. Because now you have attached to the beautiful sexual act that God has given you to bring you together, you have attached resentment to it. Because now that's been used as a tool to manipulate me, and I don't like that. So avoid doing that. Now, in some marriages it's very difficult to avoid that, because if you're having an argument with somebody and they're behaving badly, the last thing you want to do is be physically intimate with them. The temptation is then to carry that on and make it into a starvation tool. When that temptation arises, use dialogue instead to solve the problem, rather than sexual manipulation. Another thing not to use sexual activity for is a tool of avoidance. There are some people that have a very good sexual life together, and when they are in the physical act, they feel very happy. And so, when they're in a difficult argument, the one who does not want to go through the details of the argument will try and initiate the sexual activity as an escapism from the pain of having to discuss this to the pleasure. But the problem with using it as escapism is when the act is finished, the problem is still there, waiting to be solved. So, don't use it as escapism. Another way not to use it is to fulfill unhealthy fantasies. And what I call unhealthy fantasies is fantasies developed by observing material that is not good for you. Pornographic material is an example. A young lady who's now divorced came to me when she was married, and she said, I married a man, and he was an Adventist man. And she said, I was looking forward to a good, wholesome sexual relation with my husband. And she was happy to marry him. And on the wedding night, he opened his suitcase and began to take out uniforms of leather and latex and other materials and appliances. And then he began to tell her to try them on and to act in a certain way. And very soon she realized that it was not her that he was attracted to, but her ability to act out the fantasies that he had been watching. These things destroy and damage intimacy. And eventually she divorced him because she said, I cannot compete with all the images in his mind. There is no way that I can be like everything that he has seen, because he has watched too much of this stuff, and I'm not going to be an actor for the rest of my life. I want to be loved for me. not for my ability to be somewhere else. This is just 3 things that you can do to destroy the quality of your passion. Go back 1 slide now, please, to slide number 7. Things that you can do to destroy intimacy. There are some people who are happily married and they have passwords to each other's phones, computers, other internet things, and then suddenly they realize that the passwords have all been changed and they have been locked out of all the communication devices. Now the mobile phone is always passport locked and they can't get in. Things that destroy passion. Number 1, be careful about how much you share with other people. There is a tendency when your relationship is going bad to offload on a friend, even if it's a friend of the same sex. You just offload because they ask you how you're doing and you tell them, oh, this is going bad. What's happened? Well, she did this or he did this. There's a natural tendency to do that. The problem with that is that the opposite natural tendency doesn't happen. And that is, when the relationship is going good, we don't tell them the good bit. So what would happen then if you tell your friends whenever things are going bad, and when they are going good, you keep silent? And then when they're going bad, you offload again, and when they're going good, you keep silent. What will they eventually think of you? They will think that you are very foolish because you married a completely horrible person because all you've ever told them were bad things about that person. So if you are in a habit, and it's not a good habit, but if you have already been in the habit of telling your friends about the problems in your relationship, make sure you go back to them when the relationship is good and balance things up by telling them all the good things that are now happening, so they get a balanced picture. Otherwise, you will end up being embarrassed when that friend sees you with your partner and they'll say, you still with them? After all you've told me? So give a balanced picture. Another thing that destroys the intimacy, which is the talking, is overwork and fatigue. You know, when you have worked too much, and intemperance driven by the need for money or the desire for money, can cause you to be so tired, you really can't be bothered to come home and do any talking. Because you're tired. You don't watch television, you want to sleep, or you want to eat. So be careful that tiredness and overwork does not stop you from talking. Because habits form very easily. And once the habit is formed, it's hard to break it and start talking again. So even when you are tired and you don't want to talk, at least explain why you don't want to talk so the person will understand what is going on. Don't just stop. Because when you stop, it becomes a new habit. And eventually it will be hard to start up again. And thirdly, do not let misunderstandings stop you from talking. You know, men and women have different attitudes to talking, generally speaking. You know, women solve problems by talking. Men solve problems by thinking quietly to themselves. And so when there is a problem, and the wife wants to talk it through, and the man wants to think quietly about it, especially if it involves him, then there is a conflict. Because the man wants the woman to stop talking so he can think. And the woman wants the man to start talking so they can solve the problem. When this occurs, recognize each other's needs and explain to each other what is going on. If you need not to talk in order to think, then say, I need to think about this, but then I will talk. At least then it makes the person who wants to talk able to wait because they know what they're waiting on. But don't just stop, because if you stop, another problem will be created, which is the problem of feeling isolated or cut out. So make sure you treasure your intimacy and you keep talking. And never let an angry argument stop you from talking. Even if you can't agree on something, that should not stop you from talking about all the other things that you do agree on while you're thinking about the thing you don't agree on. So don't let one disagreement stop all the talking. Otherwise, it will be harder to restart it over again. We'll have a break and then we will do the others.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be reading a poem called Family That Ties Us Together. What actually ties us together as a family? Let me share this thought with you. Families should grow and support each other, sticking together stronger than any glue. But how does family ties bring us together when sometimes our family members can act like the weather, blowing hot one minute and then going cold? The numerous arguments and disagreements can be untold. But then comes the times we stand united and strong, picture perfect like the summer's sun shining all the day long. We have family ties between parents and children, brothers and sisters, uncles, aunts and cousins too. Sometimes these family ties can be broken, but who is to blame, me or you? The Bible shows us many examples similar to ours of different family ties. If we just took the time to have a deeper look, we might find a pleasant surprise. That people back then faced the same issues with family as we do, but how we deal with these issues is what will see us through. Our prime example of unity in a family tie comes from Jesus and God the Father, which we cannot deny. The constant prayer and fasting required so Jesus could fulfill his Father's will. We could benefit from the same if we took more time to pray and be still, to understand God's plan for us and as his sons and daughters and what lies in store. Take a look at Abraham's faith when he was prepared to sacrifice Isaac, the pain he would have had to endure. What a bond so strong, full of love, obedience and trust. If we are to unite as families, then all of this is a must. Most importantly though, we have our very own church family and we stand united together in Christ. This is the best family we could belong to because God's love for us has certainly sufficed. A family tie at its finest within our church as one, together we stand. On that great resurrection morning, I pray we will all be with God, joining hand in hand. Amen.
Okay. There are two things I want to remind you of in terms of keeping your passion alive. They are very obvious things, but I will say them because sometimes the most obvious things elude us. Number one, let the product be as good as the advertisement. Some people, when they are courting, they are at their best. When they've got the ring on their finger, they let it all go because they've caught him or caught her. Keep your passion alive by looking after your body. Take exercise, eat well, and continue making sure that you are at your best. Physical beauty does not last forever, but healthiness does. And you are responsible to each other to be at your healthy best. There is no excuse for looking 20 years older 5 years later. Look after yourself. I've met so many people who are supposed to be the same age as me, who look like my parents. And there's no need for it. Look after yourself. And the other thing is be kind with your words, especially when it comes to what your view is of the other person. A colleague of mine married a couple who then shortly got divorced. And the lady said, our marriage died on the wedding night. And we only struggled to keep it going for 3 more years, then we got divorced. But she said it died on the wedding night. We said, why? And she said, it is because something he said. You know, Solomon said, words are a sharp sword. With words you give life, with words you can kill. And on their wedding night, she removed her clothing and presented herself to him at her best, in the youth of her life, and he looked at her And he said, "You look better with your clothes on." And she said, that one statement alone killed the marriage. And they struggled for 3 years, and she could never get over that sentence. And eventually they got divorced. Use your words carefully, especially during the most intimate acts of your marriage. Your words can kill or they can give life. Use your words carefully. Go back one slide then, please, to slide number 5. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about commitment. And one of the reasons why people's commitment die off. And it's a common reason. So I'm telling you about it now. So if you're in it, you can change. If you're going to head towards it, you can avoid it. Many people lose the will to carry on with their marriage because it gets difficult. Now, it's not the difficulty itself that causes them to want to give up. It is the fact that they did not expect it to become difficult. If you don't expect something to happen, when it happens, it will become a surprise to you. But if you expect it, then when it happens, you will accept it, and you will carry on. If you expect marriage to be a continuation of courtship, just happy, cloud nine, wonderful experience where you're always glad to see the person and you always get on, then you will be surprised when that feeling dies off. But marriage is difficult, and the fact that this is difficult is not a problem if you understand and expect it. Because most things that are worthwhile involve difficulty and pain and discipline. A degree at university, if it is worth anything, will have some degree of difficulty and a few all-nighters and some pain before you get the certificate. Otherwise, it won't be worth much. If you want to build your body physically, you have to go to the gym and lift enough weights until you experience some pain. And after a bit of struggle, then you begin to grow and get stronger. And in the gymnasium and at university and in other walks of our life, we accept pain and we accept difficulty because we expect it and we understand its role in our development. Marriage is the same. Within marriage, we can develop strength and patience and endurance and maturity, but it will cause us some pain. But if we expect the pain before we start, when the pain comes, we will not be surprised. We will accept it and we will carry on. So many people, when the marriage gets difficult, they say, I didn't expect it to be like this, so I want out. So for those of you who are not married yet, I've got some good news for you, though it might not sound like good news. But the good news is, marriage is difficult. Do I have a witness? Marriage is difficult, but the difficulty is worthwhile if you understand what to do with it. James chapter 1. Let me close by reading you a passage of scripture. If you got your Bibles, turn with me to James chapter 1. Let me just find the scripture for you. James chapter 1, beginning at verse 2. He says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, or in some other versions it says, when you have difficulties of many kinds, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. So let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, lacking nothing. Do not bail out when it becomes difficult, Because that's the point at which you grow the most. That's the point at which you develop the most patience and the most endurance and the most maturity. And that's the point which, if you pass through it, you will be the happiest that you did. But if you bail out when it gets difficult, you will have two surprises in life. Number one, you will never get to the best part of that relationship. And number two, when you go into another relationship, it will only be a matter of time before you will come to the same difficulty that you ran away from. And if you bail out of that and go to another relationship, it will only be a matter of time before you come to the same difficulty again. And you will never get to the best part of the relationship unless you learn to go through the difficult part. And when you get through it, then you will be glad that you did. So I pray for all of your relationships, that God will give you wisdom and understanding to protect your intimacy, build your commitment, enjoy your passion, and keep all three in balance. So that when the difficult times come, you will just carry on because you expect them to come. So when they come, you will just accept them. You will learn from them, you'll grow with them, you will develop, and you will carry on. And when Jesus comes or the grave, you'll not be wishing for those things to come because you want out. You'll be glad for them to come so you can say to God, thank you for the blessings that you have given me and the life that I was able to have. And I pray that God will bless you all, whether you are going into the relationship, whether you're in it, or even if you're in a relationship having difficulties. Remember, that's the time when you can possibly grow the most. So if you need help, get help. But don't bail out during the difficult times because you miss out on the best bit. When I was a child, my mum sent me to the shop to buy some food. And the shop was a long way away, and I had to carry the food in the shopping bags by hand. You know how it is when you carry heavy shopping bags down the road and your shoulders and your neck begins to ache. And after a while, you put the shopping bags down, and then you pick them up again and you walk on a bit more. You keep putting them down until you finally get home. And I remember I was doing that, walking down the road, putting the bags down, with my shoulder burning eased up. I picked them up and I carried on. And I felt hard done by, as if this was some kind of abuse that I was suffering, because I had to carry these heavy bags for such a long time. Why couldn't my parents have a car like everybody else, even though most people didn't have cars in those days? I just wanted them to have one. When I got home, I put the heavy bags down, and then I went back to school because after-school activities and sports were going on. When I got to school, the basketball was busy, the football was going on, but my friends were still in the gym. So I went into the gym to join them, and I was enjoying myself in the gym. And then something occurred to me in the gymnasium. While I was lifting the weights in the gym, my shoulders were hurting me, and my neck was hurting, but I was enjoying it. And then I thought to myself, when I was carrying the weights down the road, which were shopping bags, the pain was causing me distress. Now I'm in the gym, lifting heavier weights than the shopping bag, enduring more pain than I was down the road, and I'm happy. What made the difference between the happiness in the gym and the sadness on the road when they were both exactly the same activity? The thing is, in the gym, I saw a purpose for what I was doing. I was doing it because I wanted to grow. When I was walking down the road, I failed to see that that had the same purpose. And so I saw it as a problem or a pain. If you can see the purpose for your pain, then your pain becomes joy. That's why James says, count it all joy when you fall into trials of many kinds, because the trying of your faith will produce patience. If you can see the benefits of what you're going through, immediately the very same thing that causes you pain will bring you joy. Then you'll be able to get through it. And then you'll be able to look back, and then you will grow. May God bless you in your relationships. Amen.